No one announces when they arrive. There are no flags, no speeches, and no warnings. When a door is breached in the middle of the night, when a target vanishes without a trace, or when a crisis ends before it ever becomes a headline, it's because someone was already there. They do not exist for the public. They do not answer to applause, and they do not ask for permission. This is not the story of a single hero, but of a force created to act when the state must operate in absolute silence. This is the story of Delta Force. Long before modern warfare, the world already understood that not every conflict could be won on an open battlefield. In ancient China, strategists defended the use of invisible agents for missions that required intelligence, infiltration, and precision. In feudal Japan, ninjas operated outside the traditional rules of war, conducting espionage, sabotage, and targeted assassinations. Across different eras and cultures, the logic was always the same: when war escapes control, soldiers outside the standard are required. As the 20th century advanced, that logic became even more necessary. Wars lost their clear front lines, enemies began to hide among civilians, and threats emerged without warning. Modern conflict became unpredictable, asymmetric, and chaotic. In this new environment, conventional armies were no longer enough. Something different was required. Something that could operate beyond traditional rules. The name behind that transformation in the United States was Charles Beckwith. A veteran of the Korean War, Beckwith understood real combat and the cost of decisions made far from the battlefield. In the early 1960s, he was deployed on secret missions in Southeast Asia. Officially, the United States was not at war in the region. In reality, it was deeply involved behind the scenes, fighting a conflict that rarely appeared in the headlines. During these missions, Beckwith realized something unsettling. Training local forces and operating indirectly was often not enough. In many situations, certain actions had to be carried out directly, without intermediaries and with zero margin for error. This belief grew stronger when he was assigned as a liaison officer with the British SAS, the United Kingdom's most elite special operations unit. Alongside the SAS, Beckwith was immersed in a brutal jungle war. Constant firefights, ambushes, heavy losses, and life-or-death decisions made in seconds. He nearly died, not in combat, but from a severe infection that left him on the brink of death. He survived by a narrow margin. When he returned to the United States, he was absolutely certain of one thing: the country had no unit that matched the SAS in preparation, autonomy, and operational realism. For years, Beckwith tried to convince senior military leadership. He wrote detailed reports, presented proposals, and persisted relentlessly. His ideas were met with resistance from a system that valued academic credentials, rigid hierarchy, and outdated doctrine. For Beckwith, modern warfare demanded adaptable soldiers, mentally resilient operators, and individuals trained to make decisions under extreme stress. Even after being ignored for more than a decade, he did not back down. As an instructor, he quietly began modifying training programs, applying lessons learned from real combat. When the Vietnam War escalated, Beckwith returned to Southeast Asia determined to prove that his concept worked. It was in this environment that Project Delta was born. An experimental unit, small and highly selective, formed by hand-picked soldiers trained to operate independently behind enemy lines. The project proved decisive in critical missions, including the rescue of troops surrounded by enemy forces in extreme situations. Beckwith was once again severely wounded in combat, but he returned with the same conclusion: the old doctrine was no longer viable. In the 1970s, the world entered a new age of fear. Aircraft hijackings, assassinations of diplomats, and hostage crises were broadcast live to a global audience. Terrorism was no longer a regional problem. It had become a global threat. In this context, the United States realized something alarming: there was no permanent counterterrorism unit ready to respond at any moment. In 1977, that vulnerability was finally addressed. Following a series of highly publicized terrorist incidents and growing political pressure, the U.S. government officially authorized the creation of Delta Force. It was not designed as a conventional military unit, but as a direct response to modern terrorism. Charles Beckwith was given authority to build and command the force, shaping it based on decades of real-world combat experience. The selection process was unforgiving. Only experienced soldiers were allowed to attempt it. Physical, psychological, and tactical tests eliminated the vast majority of candidates. Those who passed endured months of extreme training in precision shooting, urban assaults, explosives, counterterrorism, infiltration, and combat under continuous stress. Heroes were not created there. Operators were. In 1979, Delta Force faced its first major public test. The hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy in Iran led to an extremely complex and poorly coordinated operation. Logistical failures and air support issues caused the mission to collapse, resulting in loss of life and international humiliation. The impact was devastating and exposed deep structural flaws in U.S. special operations. Despite the failure, the consequences were transformative. The operation triggered a complete overhaul of the system. New joint command structures were created, dedicated air support units were established, and integration between special operations forces became a priority. Delta Force would never again operate without proper support. Beckwith retired from the Army shortly afterward, but lived to see his vision fully realized. In the decades that followed, Delta Force was involved in decisive operations across the globe. High-risk rescues, manhunts for terrorist leaders, and missions that were never officially acknowledged. In many cases, the world only learned of their involvement years later. In others, it never did. Wherever there was instability, strategic threat, or extreme risk, Delta Force was there. Operating in silence, with surgical precision and unmatched speed, it became the ultimate standard for modern special operations. Its legacy is not measured by public recognition, but by invisible results. Delta Force exists to act when every other option fails. In silence. Without warning. Anywhere in the world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the story of Delta Force?